Millionaire abandons pregnant wife at hospital. Mistress shows up to comfort him instead. The moment Isabella Thompson's vision blurred under the harsh, fluorescent lights of Street Helena's hospital, she still clung to the belief that her husband, James, would rush through the double doors, take her hand, and promise that everything would be all right. After all, he was a millionaire, a celebrated figure in high society circles, someone who seemed capable of solving any crisis with a wave of his hand. Yet when a nurse wheeled Isabella into the delivery room, no comforting presence followed. Instead, rumor has it, James stormed off in a rage, leaving behind his pregnant wife in her weakest, most vulnerable hour, and soon turned to another woman entirely. Isabella Thompson had once cherished a naive ideal of eternal love. Her early memories of James Thompson, a tall, impeccably dressed heir to the Thompson enterprises, were filled with awe and excitement. She had come from modest circumstances, working part-time at a college library to support her academic dreams, while James was born into opulence. Their worlds should never have collided, but fate, with its endless capacity for mischief, orchestrated an elaborate dance that brought them together. They'd first met during a silent auction at the White Blossom Charity Gala. Isabella, invited by an older relative who recognized her passion for community service, had worn a borrowed gown one size too large, desperately hoping she wouldn't stand out in a sea of designer attire. James arrived in a bespoke navy suit, exuding the quiet confidence that only old money seems to carry. When they were introduced, Isabella noticed his polite but distant demeanor. Later in the evening, as a silent auction for an art piece concluded, Isabella and James found themselves vying for the same painting, a modest watercolor of a seaside sunrise. They both wrote identical bids. Confusion ensued until they struck a deal. They would go halfsies, then donate the painting to the library she worked for, so it would be enjoyed by many. That first brush of closeness was electric. James's small gesture of courtesy, offering Isabella his seat or guiding her gently through the crowd, hinted that beneath his frosty exterior lay a caring spirit. Over the next few weeks, James visited the library on weekends, under the guise of checking on the painting's display. He would greet Isabella at her desk with a warm, welcoming presence that made the hustle and bustle of the library fade away. Their relationship blossomed quietly, without grand public declarations, built on shared moments, a coffee date where they discussed the classics, a spontaneous walk by the lakeside where James admitted he found solace away from the corporate world. He proposed one autumn evening under a canopy of orange-tinged leaves, a delicate diamond ring shimmering in the lantern light. Isabella's trembling yes ignited a whirlwind. Their wedding was planned in record time, orchestrated largely by James's formidable mother, Estelle Thompson. An army of planners descended upon them, finalizing every detail from the color scheme to the menu. Isabella, overwhelmed but hopeful, reassured herself that extravagant traditions were simply part of James's universe. Despite their differences, they found harmony in each other's arms. James could be aloof, overshadowed by the tremendous pressure from his family business. But behind closed doors, he revealed glimpses of genuine vulnerability, confiding in Isabella about the weight of carrying on the family legacy. For her part, Isabella found security in James's quiet strength, appreciating his unwavering confidence that he would always protect her. In the second year of their marriage, Isabella discovered she was pregnant. She'd felt strange pangs of fatigue, unexpected bouts of morning sickness, and a sudden aversion to certain foods. Sitting on the edge of her bed with the pregnancy test in her hand, she had whispered excitedly, "James, we're having a baby." His immediate reaction, however, was not the rapturous joy Isabella expected. James merely blinked, nodded stiffly, and stammered something about needing time to think. The excitement in her heart wavered for a moment. She reasoned that fatherhood could unnerve any man, particularly one who was consumed with business deals and familial expectations. Over the next few months, James's behavior grew increasingly distant. He spent late nights at the office, claiming important deals kept him away from home. Isabella tried to be understanding, even as she faced the ups and downs of her pregnancy, largely alone. When she voiced concerns about James's absences, he offered tired excuses that only heightened her sense of unease. The final straw came at 8 months pregnant, when Isabella began experiencing severe cramps and noticed unusual bleeding. A surge of panic coursed through her as she realized something was terribly wrong. Unable to reach James by phone, she called an ambulance. By the time she arrived at Street Helena's hospital, her arms and legs trembled with anxiety. She tried phoning James again, desperate to hear his voice, to feel his calming presence at the cusp of their child's arrival. At last, he picked up, and once he finally arrived, swept into the hospital waiting room with anger flickering in his eyes. "You couldn't wait until after my meeting?" James hissed, ignoring the sweat beading along her forehead. "I've got a crucial contract on the line." Isabella's tears welled, mixing with the fear coursing through her veins. His tone was as cold as winter's breath. Still, she hoped that once the shock wore off, he'd revert to his gentle self. But he didn't stay. Within 10 minutes, James had argued with a nurse over Isabella's condition, demanded immediate updates, and then marched out of the hospital with the announcement that he had other pressing matters. Isabella was left behind in a flurry of heartbreak and confusion, gasping for emotional ground even as the medical staff rushed to stabilize her condition. Just outside in the corridor, as if orchestrated by a cruel twist of fate, appeared a woman in a red coat. She was tall, striking, and exuded a self-assured energy. She placed a hand on James's shoulder, rubbing it comfortingly. Isabella caught a glimpse of them through the partially open hospital door. She didn't recognize this woman, but she felt the sting of betrayal in her gut. And though she didn't fully comprehend what was happening, her instincts screamed that this stranger meant more to James than he'd ever admit. Little did she know, this mysterious woman was named Veronica Martins, and her presence that night would become the catalyst for heartbreak, chaos, and a tidal wave of revelations that threatened to consume them all. James Thompson had grown up in a gilded cage. The Thompson empire spanned real estate development, luxury hotels, and philanthropic projects that always seemed designed to keep the family name gleaming in the public eye. He was expected to maintain a flawless public persona, no mistakes, no visible cracks. From a young age, his mother, Estelle, and father, Richard, hammered into him the doctrine that appearances were paramount. Generations of Thompsons had built their fortune on a carefully curated facade, and James, as the chosen heir, would be no different. But behind that pristine image lurked a longing for liberation. From as far back as James could remember, he had yearned to be recognized for who he truly was, a man capable of forging his own path. In college, he'd flirted with the idea of becoming a painter, or perhaps following a career in architecture, something that would blend creativity with discipline. Yet those dreams were swiftly quashed once he graduated. He was pulled back into the fold, installed as a vice president of Thompson Enterprises, and prepped by his parents to assume the role of CEO one day. When he met Isabella, James believed he had found a partner who, though from a modest background, represented the warmth and honesty he found lacking in his own environment. However, as time passed, James felt the crushing weight of the family's expectations intensify. He saw Isabella as both a refuge and an additional responsibility. When she told him about the pregnancy, old anxieties flared. His father had once told him that every Thompson man had to marry well and produce a future generation not for love, but for the family's continuity and corporate expansions. Love, to them, was secondary. The idea that James might fail at this monumental duty gnawed at him, and yet he couldn't share his turmoil with Isabella, fearing it would taint their bond. He met Veronica Martins at an exclusive investors' dinner 6 months earlier, just as Isabella's pregnancy began to show. Veronica was the daughter of Felipe Martins, a Brazilian media mogul who was exploring partnerships with Thompson Enterprises to fund new entertainment ventures. Veronica's presence was magnetic. She navigated corporate banquets with ease, possessed a quick wit, and offered James an intoxicating mix of empathy and validation. She listened intently when he voiced frustrations about his father, the suffocating board meetings, or the crushing sense of duty that had begun to strangle him. Their interactions started innocently enough, late-night calls about business deals, casual banter after official dinners, but soon lines blurred. Veronica had that ability to make James feel acknowledged without condemning him for feeling overwhelmed by fatherhood. She flirted, teased, confided in him about her own family traumas, how her father never truly listened to her, how she felt overshadowed by powerful men at every corporate event. Their mutual confessions created a dangerous intimacy. One evening, after a series of tense negotiations about an international hotel chain acquisition, James found himself at the bar with Veronica. She insisted that he needed to unwind, to loosen the tie that was slowly choking his identity. Drinks turned into a haze of confessions, James lamenting the pressures of impending fatherhood, Veronica hinting at her loneliness in a man's corporate world. Their first illicit kiss happened that night, in a hidden corner of a lavish hotel suite. A wave of guilt crashed over James afterward, but the taste of escape was too sweet. Before long, Veronica ensnared him in an affair that threatened every vow he'd ever made to Isabella. When Veronica learned about Isabella's complications at the hospital, she decided to meet James there, effectively marking her territory. She wasn't merely a shoulder to cry on. She wanted James to know that with her by his side, life could be simpler, freer of the burdens of fatherhood and familial demands. Indeed, Veronica's presence in that hospital corridor was a bold statement. She would stand by James in moments of stress, while Isabella was left in tears. But what Veronica hadn't considered was that stepping into James's personal life would fling open the floodgates of scandal. Word travels fast among the wealthy and connected. A cunning nurse recognized James from a magazine feature about New York's most eligible heirs. She also spotted Veronica's father at public events. Rumors started swirling through the hospital staff grapevine. By dawn, half the medical team on the floor whispered about how the millionaire heir had abandoned his pregnant wife during a crisis, comforted by a mysterious woman in red. Inside the hospital room, Isabella attempted to maintain composure. She was stabilized, but the doctor emphasized the need for immediate bed rest. The baby showed signs of stress, but the medical team managed to keep mother and child safe for now. Exhaustion draped over Isabella, yet her mind buzzed with questions. Why was James so cold? Who was that woman? And how could he just walk out at the moment she needed him most? To her surprise, a single visitor arrived later that night, her sister, Emily Hughes, a private accountant who had her suspicions about James from the start. Emily, a level-headed realist, believed wholeheartedly in love, but was wary of wealth's power to corrupt. When she saw Isabella lying pale and frail in the hospital bed, Emily's protective instincts took over. "Isabella, where is James?" she demanded, her voice tight with concern. "Gone." That was all Isabella could whisper through her tears. Emily enveloped her sister in a hug, offering reassurance that she wasn't alone. Welling with anger and heartbreak, Emily resolved to dig deeper into what was happening behind the scenes. While Isabella recovered in the hospital, James's world outside spun into chaos. On the one hand, Veronica sought to capitalize on the moment, nurturing James's despair. She texted him incessantly. "Are you okay? Do you need anything? Let me help you forget." Her messages were laced with a thrilling promise of escape, urging him to break free from the weight of fatherhood. On the other hand, James couldn't shut out pangs of conscience. No matter how fiercely he tried to drown them in work or Veronica's arms, the shame of abandoning his pregnant wife at her most vulnerable moment haunted him. A board meeting for Thompson Enterprises convened 3 days later. Estelle and Richard Thompson stood at the head of an ornate conference table with James seated beside them. Partners and executives filled the chairs, discussing expansions, acquisitions, and profit margins. Yet tension simmered just beneath the polished veneer of their strategic discussions. When the meeting concluded, Estelle pulled James aside into a quiet corridor. "What on earth is going on?" she whispered sharply. "I'm hearing rumors that you left Isabella in the hospital, that some other woman was seen with you. Do you realize how disastrous this is for our family's reputation?" James bristled. "I can handle my personal affairs," he replied, posture rigid. "What matters is that I've secured negotiations with the Martins." Estelle's lips flattened. "Don't you dare conflate your affair with business. Your father and I have worked too hard to maintain our standing. If there's any public embarrassment over this, you can count on losing more than just the family's goodwill." James glowered, but his mother's threat underlined a brutal truth. His every move was scrutinized. The Thompson name was bigger than any individual within it. If he wanted to remain an integral part of the empire, he would have to manage the optics. Meanwhile, Emily Hughes had embarked on her own investigation. She combed through social media, gleaning fragments of Veronica's identity. A certain post from a lavish corporate party featured James in the background, and at his side was a woman with the same tall, commanding posture, wearing a striking red dress. Emily recognized her at once. Tagging in the photo read, "Veronica Martins, daughter of Felipe Martins." Another image from the same event showcased James and Veronica standing intimately close, their laughter captured mid-frame. Armed with this information, Emily confronted James at his office one afternoon. He'd been dodging her calls, so she marched straight past the receptionist. James was furious at the intrusion. "You can't just barge in here," he snapped. Standing behind his desk, Emily showed him the pictures. "Is this her, James? The woman you left my sister for?" A flush of anger tinged his cheeks. "It's not that simple. It's never that simple, is it?" Emily retorted. "My sister is lying in a hospital bed, carrying your child, waiting for you. And you're here, drowning in business deals, and her?" He exhaled sharply, glancing at the photo. "Isabella doesn't understand the pressure I'm under." Emily's voice shook with restrained fury. "No, she wouldn't. Because she believes in the fairy tale you sold her, James. She believes in your goodness. She believes you're just stressed. But let me tell you something, you don't throw away your family because you're under pressure." James fell silent, casting his gaze to the floor. He looked, for a moment, like a remorseful child caught in a lie he couldn't fully explain. Before leaving, Emily delivered a final admonition. "This isn't just about you, James. It's about an unborn child who might grow up not knowing their father. And it's about my sister, whose heart you've broken." When Emily emerged from his office, she realized how complicated things truly were. She'd arrived determined to corner him, but seeing his turmoil hinted that some larger story lurked in the shadows: pressures, obligations, deals. But does that justify abandonment, she wondered. Still, she had pledged to stand by Isabella, no matter what. Back at the hospital, Isabella's condition stabilized enough for her to return home under strict bed rest. Emily helped set up the guest bedroom for her so that she'd have easy access to everything she needed. Though Isabella was emotionally spent, she found fleeting comfort in the presence of her supportive sister and a small circle of friends who brought meals and visited in the evenings. One late afternoon, a week after the hospital incident, a package arrived at Isabella's doorstep. It contained a thick manila folder marked confidential. Inside were documents that detailed new partnerships between Thompson Enterprises and Martin's Global Media. But nestled among them was something more personal, grainy security footage from the night. Isabella was hospitalized, showing James and Veronica in the hallway. James looked visibly upset, pacing in agitation. Veronica placed her hands on his shoulders, then leaned in as if sharing an intimate confession. The footage ended with them walking away together, leaving a frantic nurse behind, presumably rushing to check on Isabella. Isabella's stomach twisted. Who had sent this? The folder was anonymous, but there was no doubt about its veracity. Each frame hammered home the reality of her husband's betrayal, no matter how many times she'd tried to rationalize it away. That evening, as Isabella lay in bed with the folder resting across her lap, tears streaked her cheeks. The truth was undeniable. James had replaced her in every sense. Perhaps her illusions had masked the warning signs, or maybe James himself had changed beyond recognition. One certainty remained: she could no longer wait passively for him to return. In her womb, their child moved, reminding her that she had a new life to protect, a life that deserved stability and love, whether James was part of it or not. James awoke to a notification on his phone, an urgent text from Veronica. She insisted he meet her at once, claiming she had something essential to share. It was a grey morning, the city skyline cloaked in a shroud of fog. When he arrived at her penthouse suite, Veronica offered him a glass of whiskey, ignoring the early hour. In her hand, she clutched a thin envelope. "What's this about?" James asked, eyebrows knitted in concern. Veronica's voice took on a trembling edge. "I'm leaving the city for a while. My father wants me in Rio to finalize negotiations for our expansion, but before I go, I need to show you something." She handed him the envelope. Inside were pictures of the two of them in compromising situations at a secluded resort, stepping out of his car late at night, even a moment where they embraced in front of a fountain near the Thompson family estate. Some were recent, others older. The photos were crisp, well lit. Someone had been following them. James felt his heart sink. If these images reached the tabloids, the scandal would be unstoppable. He'd not only face a public relations nightmare, but potentially a legal blowback if Isabella decided to seek a hefty divorce settlement. And though money might not be a problem for him, the stain on his reputation would be near impossible to erase. Veronica's eyes shone with tears, real or feigned. James couldn't tell. "I didn't know who else to turn to. I thought you should see them. Who sent these?" he demanded, scanning every photograph. He recognized the vantage point of certain shots. They were places that only a cunning paparazzo or a private investigator would frequent. Veronica shrugged, frustration etched on her features. "Anonymous, same as that folder you told me was sent to your home. Someone clearly wants to ruin us. But we can stay ahead of it. We can manage the narrative." His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Estelle, commanding that he come to the Thompson mansion. He turned to Veronica. "I have to go," he said. "I'll handle this." As James drove to the mansion, dread tightened his chest. His mind spun with suspicions. Could the blackmailer be someone within the company? A competitor aiming to undermine Thompson Enterprises, or maybe even someone seeking revenge on Veronica's father? When James stepped into the mansion's grand foyer, he was met by Estelle, Richard, and unbeknownst to him, 2 lawyers from the family's legal team. They wasted no time presenting him with a crisis. The photographs had found their way to various media outlets. Calls were already pouring in from tabloids, hungry for comment. The spectre of scandal loomed dangerously close. Estelle confronted James with ice in her voice. "What have you done? You're married. Your wife is pregnant, and these disgraceful images are about to explode into public view. Our lawyers are trying to stall them, offering bribes, legal threats, anything. But there's no guarantee we can contain this. James began, fumbling for words. I never meant for it to get out of hand. Richard slammed his hand on the wooden table, rattling the antique vase perched atop it. Do you not realize the consequences? Our family name is everything. And if we lose that, we lose the cornerstone of our business empire. Your wife is in the hospital, and you're gallivanting around with the daughter of another tycoon. Have you thought about the ramifications for the merger or the corporate expansions? James felt cornered. He pivoted to anger. All my life you two have told me to put business first. You hammered into me that maintaining appearances is paramount. Maybe if you'd allowed me to breathe, to choose my path. Estelle cut him off. Don't blame us for your affair. You want to ruin your marriage? Fine. But you're not ruining this family. In that moment, James realized the precariousness of his situation. In the eyes of his parents, family and empire were synonymous. Isabella's well-being was secondary to the Thompson brand's survival. He felt a flash of guilt as he recognized he had partially become a byproduct of this toxic environment, seeking solace in Veronica to escape the suffocation. With the lawyers present, Richard demanded James sign documents that effectively placed him on indefinite leave from Thompson Enterprises. They cited stress-related reasons to the public, but among themselves they knew the truth. James would remain hidden until the scandal was quieted. He was to issue a bland public statement expressing regret for any confusion and vow to be by his wife's side. The fact that he'd have to pretend to be the attentive husband stung more than he cared to admit. But overshadowing all of this was a bigger shock. Estelle calmly declared that Isabella was considering a divorce and that the family wouldn't stop her if it meant avoiding further controversy. We've spoken to her sister, Emily, Estelle said, tapping manicured nails on the marble tabletop. Isabella is under too much stress. If removing you from her life helps maintain peace, so be it. Our top priority is that child's health and, of course, the Thompson reputation. James's heart lurched. For a moment, the gravity of losing Isabella and, by extension, his unborn child became painfully real. Yes, he had cheated, he had succumbed to weaknesses, but did he truly want to lose them both forever? Word reached Isabella that James was effectively ousted from day-to-day operations of the company. She felt no triumph in his downfall. The man she had once adored was now a tangled mess of secrets, guilt, and corporate manipulation. There were times she questioned if the James she fell in love with had ever truly existed. Her sister, Emily, who had become somewhat of a detective, discovered that the blackmailer likely belonged to a tabloid network. She had managed to intercept additional threats aimed at both James and Veronica. The story was poised to break any day now, which meant the entire Thompson and Martin's families were scrambling behind the scenes. One crisp morning, Isabella found the courage to walk, albeit slowly, through her living room, gazing at old photographs of her and James. Their wedding day photo sat framed on the mantel, the newlyweds beaming as they cut an elaborate cake, gold and white with sugar flowers. Tears pricked her eyes. The photo was a relic from a time she believed in unconditional love, that love alone could conquer any barrier. Now, the illusions had shattered. Emily approached from behind, placing a gentle hand on Isabella's shoulder. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not sure," Isabella admitted, her voice hushed. "I feel betrayed, angry. But there's this tiny part of me that wonders if we can ever salvage anything." "Don't let sentimentality blind you," Emily warned. "He abandoned you when you needed him most. Think about the baby." Isabella brushed her hand over her belly. I am. That's why this is so difficult. I want my child to have a father, but I also want them to be raised in a loving environment, not one built on lies. Emily nodded sympathetically. You're right. There's no easy choice here, but you should do what brings you peace. That afternoon, as Isabella rested on the couch, the doorbell rang. Emily opened it to reveal James Thompson. He stood in the doorway like a repentant ghost, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Isabella instructed Emily to let him in, if only to talk things through. James entered hesitantly, glancing around the living room where he once felt at home. The tension in the air was suffocating. He cleared his throat. How are you? Isabella measured her response. I'm coping. The doctor says I need rest and less stress, but we both know that's been hard to come by. James offered a weak nod. He was about to speak when his gaze fell on the manila folder containing the hospital footage. His shoulders slumped, acknowledging that no words could erase the proof of his betrayal. I came here to say I'm sorry, he began, voice trembling. I let the pressure, the expectations, everything get to me. And I turned to Veronica because she understood the corporate world and offered me an escape. I never meant to hurt you. A flash of indignation crossed Isabella's features. Is that supposed to make me feel better? That she understood you? Why couldn't you talk to me, James? I was afraid. Afraid of letting you down, afraid you'd see I wasn't as strong as you imagined. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. We all have fears, but we don't walk away from the people we love because of them. James moved closer, hands shaking slightly. I know. I'm not here expecting forgiveness, but I want you to know I do love you. I love our baby. This affair. It was a mistake. I ended it. Veronica is leaving for Brazil, and I'm not going after her. Isabella's mind churned with conflicting emotions. Just a few weeks ago, she would have welcomed a statement like that with open arms. But now, the memory of lying alone in that hospital bed was impossible to forget. Words mean nothing if they're not followed by action, she said, voice unsteady. I need time to decide what's best for me and our child. James nodded, tears brimming in his own eyes. I understand. Emily re-entered the room, her protective stare unwavering. Sensing the conversation was over, James slowly turned to leave. Before stepping out, he paused. I'll be at the Thompson estate, he said quietly, if you need anything. In the silence that followed, Isabella closed her eyes, listening to the echo of James's footsteps fading away. Deep down, she wondered if there was any route back to the love they once shared, or whether that bridge was irreparably burned. In the following weeks, the scandal broke publicly. Tabloid headlines blazed. Millionaire heir abandons pregnant wife, spotted with secret mistress. Social media exploded with speculation. Paparazzi stalked the Thompson estate, hoping to capture a glimpse of either James or Isabella. Talk show hosts debated the drama, and online commenters took sides. Some labeled Isabella a helpless victim, others framed James as a cold-hearted villain. Yet others criticized both for airing their dirty laundry in the public eye. The Thompson family scrambled to salvage their name. Estelle and Richard maintained a stoic front, issuing press releases that vaguely addressed a personal matter. Veronica vanished from the public sphere, retreating to Brazil under Felipe Martins's watchful eye. The business partnership continued, but it was overshadowed by the swirling gossip. For Isabella, these days were a nightmare. She could barely step outside without flashbulbs blinding her. Emotional stress gnawed at her, threatening to complicate her pregnancy further. Each new wave of gossip battered her resolve. Yet she found unexpected solace in people's sympathy. Flowers and supportive letters arrived at her doorstep from strangers who had read about her plight and empathized with a scorned wife's struggles. James, on the other hand, felt torn between multiple worlds. He was shunned from the daily workings of Thompson Enterprises and forced to grapple with the wreckage he had unleashed on his personal life. Alone in his study at the estate, he pored over the letters his family's lawyers drafted, trying to quell the scandal. He was also bombarded by calls from Veronica, who didn't take kindly to being cast aside. She threatened to reveal more intimate details if James didn't defend her publicly. One chilly evening, James's phone buzzed with a text from Veronica. "You think you can discard me like a used toy? You'll regret it." It rattled him. He feared that Veronica might blackmail him again, or worse, contact Isabella directly. He realized too late that tangling with Veronica had unleashed a storm he struggled to control. Amid the chaos, Isabella's contractions began prematurely. It was a crisp morning when she awoke to an intense pain gripping her abdomen. Fear jolted through her as she recognized this was far too early for labor. Emily rushed her to the hospital. Nurses hurried to assess the situation, hooking her up to monitors. The baby's heart rate dipped alarmingly, prompting the medical team to consider emergency measures. Isabella's heart raced as she clutched Emily's hand. All the emotional upheaval, James's betrayal, the tabloids, the pressure she feared, it had taken a toll on the fragile life growing within her. In desperation, Emily phoned James, who arrived breathless, ignoring the scandalizing stares of onlookers. As he rushed into Isabella's room, she shot him a tearful, panicked look. This time, James didn't storm out. Instead, he pressed her hand against his cheek, whispering apologies and assurances that he was there now, that he wouldn't leave her again. Despite her anger and heartbreak, Isabella needed that reassurance, if only to calm the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. Their baby's fate hung in the balance. Doctors administered medication to slow labor and monitored Isabella's vitals closely. It was a terrifying ordeal, hours stretching into an endless vigil. Through it all, James remained steadfast by Isabella's side, refusing to budge. Eventually, the crisis subsided and the contractions faded. The moment the danger passed, Isabella broke down in sobs of relief. James gently wiped her tears away. For a brief moment, in that hospital room, they resembled the couple they had once been, vulnerable, deeply connected, and willing to sacrifice everything for each other. But once the adrenaline cooled, Isabella recalled the heartbreak and the sense of abandonment that had defined their recent past. When morning came and the doctors confirmed that both mother and child were stable, James spoke to Isabella in a hushed, sincere tone. "I know I'm the last person on earth you might want around, but I love you. I love our baby. I made a grave mistake. I became everything I promised you. I'd never be cold, distant, unfaithful. I can't change the past, but I'm begging for a chance to build a future." Isabella lay back against the hospital pillows, her face etched with exhaustion. Though anger and pain still gnawed at her, she could see genuine remorse in James's eyes. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," she murmured, tears lacing her voice. "But I owe it to my child to try to see if there's something worth salvaging." James exhaled shakily, as if he had been holding his breath. "Thank you," he whispered. It was enough for now, a thread of hope to cling to amid the wreckage. A month passed, during which Isabella remained under careful observation. Her baby held on, growing stronger each day. Meanwhile, James did everything in his power to prove he was reformed. He cut ties with Veronica, changed his phone number, and offered full transparency to Isabella about his dealings. He even attended therapy sessions at Isabella's suggestion, where he admitted to deep-seated insecurities and crippling family pressure. Not everyone was convinced by James's transformation. Emily remained vigilant, watching him like a hawk. Estelle and Richard, while relieved that the scandal had taken a quieter turn, were more concerned about how best to reintroduce James into the company's daily operations without reigniting public scrutiny. Just when it seemed things might settle, another storm brewed on the horizon. Veronica Martins reappeared in the city. Rumor had it she was spurned by her father, who blamed her for nearly jeopardizing a major business alliance. She was stripped of her corporate responsibilities and had returned, or so the whispers went, to take revenge on James for destroying her future prospects. No one knew precisely what form her vendetta might take. One crisp afternoon, James was pushing Isabella's wheelchair around the hospital garden for some fresh air. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating dappled patterns on the ground. Isabella, now in her 8th month, breathed in the fragrant air, momentarily at peace. A nurse approached, holding a sealed envelope. "Pardon me, Miss S. Thompson," she said. "Someone asked me to deliver this to you." Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You think James can be trusted? He told me he loved me too. He's just buying time. We'll see who wins in the end." No signature, but the handwriting was scrawled, almost manic. At the bottom was a date, next Wednesday. Isabella's hands shook as she handed the note to James. His eyes widened. "Veronica," he whispered in horror. Isabella's heart sank at how certain he sounded. That very Wednesday, the date scrawled on the note, a major press conference was scheduled at Thompson Enterprises, the official signing of a new contract with a European conglomerate. Estelle insisted James and Isabella attend together to display unity and quell any lingering rumors. Isabella was hesitant. She loathed the idea of stepping into the public eye in her condition. But James implored her, saying it was a chance to show the world their solidarity. The day arrived. Cameras flashed madly as James helped Isabella from the car. She donned a simple, elegant maternity dress, head held high despite her anxiety. Once inside, they made their way to a large conference hall lined with press, executives, and a few board members. No sooner had the official statements begun than Veronica Martins made her dramatic entrance. She swept in wearing a striking red ensemble, eerily reminiscent of the night she'd comforted James at the hospital. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The cameras pivoted, zeroing in on the confrontation. In the hush, Veronica glided up to the podium and seized the microphone. "I have a statement to make," she announced, her voice resounding. Security personnel darted forward, but Veronica's gaze pinned them back. "And I think Mr. and Miss S. Thompson, along with everyone else here, deserves to know the truth." The hall descended into chaos. Journalists shouted questions, executives whispered in alarm, and flashbulbs erupted. James tried to rush forward to intercept her, but the crowd held him at bay. Veronica brandished a folder. "Should I show them, James? Show them exactly who you are behind closed doors," she taunted, waving what appeared to be photographs. The tension was electric, threatening to explode. Isabella, feeling short of breath, leaned against a table for support, her heart hammered in her chest. She watched Veronica's smug expression, realizing this woman was determined to drag James and possibly their entire family through the mud. In a sudden surge of adrenaline, Isabella forced her way through the throng. She stared Veronica down, her voice surprisingly steady. "You've done enough damage. Whatever you have, show it. But let me tell you one thing. I know my husband made mistakes, grave mistakes, but I also know he's trying to be a better man. If you think you can blackmail him or humiliate me, you might succeed momentarily. Yet you will never break us permanently because we're choosing to heal." A hush fell. Isabella's words startled both James and Veronica. For the first time, it was clear that Isabella wasn't the fragile victim some had labeled her. She possessed a spine of steel, forged by heartbreak and survival. Veronica sneered. "I have nothing to lose," she said, tearing open the folder. But the security personnel finally reached her, restraining her. She struggled to release the photos. Some scattered to the floor, a few more damning images of her and James in intimate positions, dinners and stolen kisses. Yet these were no longer revelations. They were echoes of a past that James had already confessed. Journalists scrambled to snap pictures of the pictures. Some rushed to pick them up. A swirl of confusion filled the air as executives argued. Security tried to restore order, and cameras clicked relentlessly. James guided Isabella away from the fray, pressing her against his side, protective and determined. The baby stirred within her, and she prayed the stress wouldn't trigger another early labor. Estelle and Richard hovered close, offering a protective shield from further intrusion. Finally, building security escorted Veronica off the premises. The press conference broke down into pandemonium. Estelle quickly called for an impromptu statement, insisting that Thompson Enterprises disavowed any personal vendettas or blackmail attempts. James, still breathless, stood by Isabella's side before the cameras and apologized publicly for the turmoil his indiscretions had caused. But he reaffirmed his commitment to his family, his wife, and the child they were expecting. As the day ended, the images of Veronica's dramatic display dominated every news outlet. But an equally powerful image emerged, Isabella's quiet resolve in the face of humiliating revelations. Public sentiment began to shift, with many praising her composure and fortitude. Overnight, she became a sympathetic figure, a symbol of resilience, while James, though heavily criticized, earned a measure of respect for standing by his wife and owning up to his mistakes. In the aftermath of Veronica's spectacle, James and Isabella returned home, emotionally drained. She needed rest more than ever. James, for all his flaws, spared no effort in aiding her recovery, cooking imperfectly but earnestly, monitoring her vitals, waking at night to ensure she was comfortable. The sincerity of his dedication was evident, and though Isabella remained cautious, she allowed herself to appreciate the man he was striving to become. Emily saw the changes too, and her frosty demeanor toward James thawed to a wary acceptance. She watched him tuck a blanket around Isabella's feet, fetch her water, massage her shoulders to ease the tension. There was no longer a trace of that aloof scion who once marched out of a hospital room without a backward glance. Outside their bubble, the Thompson lawyers worked tirelessly to contain any further fallout from Veronica's actions. Estelle busied herself crafting philanthropic efforts to overshadow the scandal, launching a fund for expectant mothers requiring financial aid. The media, never short on drama, moved on to new salacious stories, though whispers of the Thompson fiasco lingered in some corners. As Isabella's due date neared, her mind churned with conflicting emotions. She had seen James's remorse up close, witnessed his unwavering devotion in the aftermath of a near tragedy. Yet the betrayal loomed in her memory. Forgiveness, she realized, was not a simple declaration, it was a daily choice. Did she have the strength to choose it? Late one evening, when the city's lights twinkled through the bedroom windows, she and James curled up together in silence. Then, softly, she asked, "What happens when the baby arrives?" He turned to her, eyes full of longing. "I want to be there for every moment. The midnight feedings, the diaper changes, the doctor visits. I want to do it all. And I want to earn your trust back, day by day, if you'll let me." Isabella's heart clenched. She felt tears gather. "I don't know how to just forget, James. It's not that easy." He gently placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. "I don't expect you to forget. I only hope you can forgive. And if you can't yet, I'll keep trying until you can." In that quiet confession, Isabella realized that healing might be a gradual process, painful, fraught with doubt, but still possible. For the sake of their child, and perhaps the love that once united them, she decided to try. A few weeks later, on a crisp spring morning, Isabella woke to a deep ache rolling through her body. This time, the contractions were real, on schedule. James leapt into action. Although fear flashed in his eyes, he supported Isabella to the car. Emily followed closely behind. At the hospital, the staff rushed her into the maternity ward. Despite the lingering stares of a few who recognized them from the scandal, the doctors and nurses remained professional. A swirl of anticipation and anxiety enveloped them all. James stayed by Isabella's side, holding her hand through the surge of pain. With each contraction, she squeezed his fingers like a lifeline. Labor stretched on for hours. Isabella felt she was teetering between exhaustion and exhilaration. James murmured words of encouragement, wiping the sweat from her brow, braving Isabella's sharp nails digging into his skin whenever the contractions peaked. He even apologized through her shrill cries when she yelled at him for causing all this turmoil in the first place, both the baby and the betrayal. Finally, after one last intense push, a sharp cry pierced the air. A flurry of activity surrounded them, and the doctor announced the birth of a baby boy. Tremors of relief coursed through Isabella's body. When they placed the tiny, wriggling infant in her arms, her tears fell freely. James leaned in, eyes overflowing with wonder and humility. The child was small but perfect, each whimper a testament to new life. In the hush that followed, the hospital lights seemed gentler, and the memory of scandal momentarily receded. Isabella gazed at her son, gratitude filling every corner of her heart. She peeked at James, whose eyes shone with a mixture of awe and repentance. And though their road had been marred with betrayal, heartbreak, and public humiliation, in that instant, they found a moment of pure unity. James whispered, "Welcome to the world, Henry." The name they'd chosen months ago, before the chaos, now carried a poignant weight. This child represented hope, a second chance, not just for them individually, but for their battered marriage, their fractured hearts. Months later, inside the refurbished nursery of the Thompson estate, Isabella rocked baby Henry gently in her arms. Pictures of her and James adorned the walls, smiling photos capturing the fleeting joys of their early years, as well as more recent snapshots that showcased their attempt at rebuilding. The philanthropic fund Estelle had launched in Isabella's name provided comfort to underprivileged expectant mothers, inadvertently turning the scandal into a catalyst for good. Over time, the tabloids moved on, though occasional references to the old drama still surfaced in gossip columns. Veronica Martins remained a phantom on the periphery. She occasionally posted cryptic remarks on social media from various glamorous locales, suggesting she was thriving despite the scandal. Whispers circulated that her father had reinstated her into the family business, though under tighter scrutiny. She seemed determined to cling to relevance. James and Isabella found themselves ignoring her entirely, focusing instead on the life they were creating with Henry. The relationship between James and his parents also changed. Estelle and Richard, while still firmly rooted in high society, realized the cost of constantly prioritizing the family name above personal well-being. They softened their approach, perhaps fearful of losing James and their grandchild entirely. The family wasn't magically cured of its complexities, but there was a willingness to communicate more openly. Isabella and James began couples therapy, learning new ways to share their vulnerabilities without resorting to secrecy or infidelity. Week by week, they uncovered the deep-seated insecurities, the misunderstandings that had corroded their bond. Forgiveness unfolded slowly, an ongoing process rather than a single act. Isabella still experienced pangs of hurt whenever she recalled lying alone in the hospital the first time. But every time James rose in the night to tend to Henry so she could rest, every time he admitted his faults and reaffirmed his commitment, some of that hurt chipped away. In truth, they might never return to the innocent idealism that once defined their union. Perhaps that was for the best. Their marriage now rested on a more mature foundation acknowledgement of human frailty coupled with a dedication to do better. Trust was re-earned like pieces of a puzzle painstakingly put back together. Sometimes, during their quiet evenings, Isabella wondered about the ghost of what might have been had. James never had an affair if they'd simply welcomed Henry into a stable household. But life, she learned, wasn't neat or predictable. It twisted and turned with heartbreak and hope, forging them into stronger individuals than they might have become in a simpler story. Now, as Isabella finished feeding baby Henry, James walked in quietly, setting a bouquet of fresh lilies, her favorite, on the nearby table. He kissed her forehead and bent down to place a soft peck on Henry's cheek. It was a small, tender moment, one that spoke of daily commitment rather than grand apologies. They exchanged a glance, one that carried the weight of their history, the pain, the second chances, and the promise of tomorrow. Outside, the sun bathed the sprawling estate in warm light, illuminating the path they still had to traverse. But with Henry's gentle breathing and their hands entwined, they resolved to face whatever came next, confident that this time they would choose each other even when life's storms threatened to tear them apart. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster journey of love, betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption. Life rarely follows a fairy tale script, and sometimes our greatest trials become the crucible in which our deepest strengths are forged. Isabella's unwavering resolve in the face of abandonment reminds us that even in our weakest moments, we can find a wellspring of courage. James's battles with familial obligation and personal failings show us that redemption, though hard-earned, is always possible. The birth of their son, Henry, speaks to the power of new beginnings, even in the wake of chaos. If you found yourself enthralled by the drama and turmoil of this story, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing riveting real-life, inspired fiction straight to you. Stay tuned for more captivating tales of love, loss, and second chances. Together, we'll explore the human stories that resonate across time,